Love Zoom. Okay. Hey everybody, I hope you're having a fantastic day, and this is Wendy Cotillo with She Gets Business, and I am delighted to share with you today my friend and amazing business builder, Amanda Wilson, who is the founder and creator of Voxapod. And there's so many things we can talk about with Amanda because she is one incredibly smart cookie. But today what we're talking about is funding your business through crowdfunding. So one of the things that really people struggle with all the time when they're building their business is, how do I fund this thing? How do I actually get the money in order to create the business I want? And there's lots of things that we could talk about in that subject alone, but a big myth is that people should just rock right up and get a loan from a bank. In the state that I live in, which is Oregon, and Amanda as well, there's only 4 banks that actually lend less than $250,000. So if you are a new business builder, that's not where you go. And really what you want to do is be focusing wherever you can on equity financing. That is money that you don't have to pay back. That can be through your personal savings, through friends and family, through grants, and then through this format, Kickstarter. So welcome, Amanda. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me, Wendy.
My pleasure. And we just had a giggle before we went live because you said, little hiccup because my girls are home today. So you have 5 daughters.
I have 5 girls.
That's amazing. And our business builder, and you said you're in your basement, which I love.
No, I'm down in my community room.
You're in your community room.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people can appreciate having to find a corner away from the family in order to get work done. So I get that. So tell us, Amanda, what is Voxapod? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Voxapod is a menstrual cup. It's an alternative to pads and tampons. So it works a lot like a tampon in that it folds and inserts, but rather than absorbing, it actually collects menstrual fluid. But the biggest thing about it is that you can wear it for up to 12 hours and it's toxic free. So a lot of people don't realize that the industry standard for pads and tampons, those companies are actually not regulated to fully disclose what's in their products. So a lot of them are laden with toxic chemicals. They often undergo a pretty intense bleaching process because as a consumer industry, we have deemed whiter to be like more clean or sanitary in our mind. And so they sell better when they're whiter. So they undergo bleaching process. The problem with it is we're putting this in like the most absorbent part of our female anatomy. And so when you think about that, and I started realizing like what I was, here I was being conscious of like what I was eating. I was being conscious of what I, was exposing my kids to. But then here I was, you kind of let things slip in the back door, I call it. And in this case, somewhat literally, right? And so there was this kind of epiphany moment of like, how do I fix this? And I was also having troubles personally with tampons, I kind of liken it to the fact that like at 35, I probably would not wear the same bra that I wore at 15. Therefore, like it was a good time in my life to start questioning, like, should I be using the same period care that I've been using since I was 13,
Right.
And I remember reaching out to a friend and asking her what she used because she was a dive master. And so she'd go out on these 12-hour excursions to certify people. And I thought, how do you change a pad or a tampon? Like you're in this dry suit, you're not taking all this equipment off. It's too much work.
Right.
And she introduced me to menstrual cups. The problem was I couldn't find one that fit my body or that I liked.
Wow.
So I decided to innovate one. So that's kind of the genesis story. And then we're also a benefit corporation. So really baked into the DNA of everything we do is sustainability and also trying to develop more gender parity in this world, more equitable society for women. And we do that by fighting for policies that ensure all women have access to safe period care products, but also products. We have a partner with an organization called Femme International in Southeast Africa, and we work with them to help girls in the developing world stay in school after they start their period. Many of them drop out afterwards or miss a significant amount of school.
Yeah.
And we know statistically that if girls get a secondary education, it radically changes their ability to invest in their own economic development and just their own quality of life.
Yeah.
So
love that about the company.
Yeah.
That kind of relates to another question, which is, you know, firstly, I became aware of menstrual cups probably in the last 3 years, and I'm amazed that I didn't know about them before.
Yeah.
And your video on your Kickstarter page is so great, talking about the waste that happens with, you know, used sanitary stuff, and obviously the inconvenience. So lower footprint, ecological footprint, and you know, this wonderful benefit relationship that you have with Femme International, you said?
Yeah, Femme International. Yeah.
But it's not a common thing for people to say, oh, now I'm aware of this product that solves the problem, and so I'm going to go make another one. So what is it that made you think there's something in here, like something I can do better? You said it didn't your body, but there's more than that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think there are some really terrific menstrual cups on the market. So we are not staking the claim of we're the first one to innovate a menstrual cup. They were actually innovated by a woman in the 1930s, and she filed a patent in 1937. And there's potentially other people that innovated it even before then, but she's the first one historically that we know of, documented. And since then, there's been several cups that have really pioneered that market for us. And I'm really thankful that those brands exist. But if you walk down the quote unquote feminine hygiene aisle, you'll see several different shapes and sizes of pads and tampons, because, big surprise, we're all not shaped the same down there, and our flows are a little bit different and varying. And so I feel like women deserve to have multiple options. And what I specifically was looking for was, how do I solve a problem that I'm having with the other cups that I'm trying? And so that's when I started really looking at the design of how they were made, and what was uncomfortable about them, or what was I having, a hard time with. And this really came out for me when I was, I'm a really avid hiker and bodybuilder. And so there would be times where I would have some of these other cups in, and I would be having some issues with it. And I'm like, okay, I love the concept of this. I'm totally married to the concept. But I would really love a design that improves on some of these things that are causing me discomfort or leakage, or frankly, like some of them were just too big, too long, did not work for me. So that's when we started really looking at basically not just the design of like what the cup looks like, which is when you're talking design patents, but we started looking at how the cup actually functions itself. And that's where you're talking about a utility patent. It's really hard to get a utility patent because you're looking at how something functions, not just how it appears. So what you see right now in the market is you've got a couple really signature brands that have pioneered things, and they're great. And I'm grateful for those companies, and I think they're reputable brands. So I don't have anything bad to say about them. But as they've gained popularity, you're seeing a lot more cups come into the market that are taking just a slight variation of the physical appearance and design, and changing that so that they're not infringing on anything when they go to market. And sure, those cups might function for some people. But what we really wanted to solve with our cup is the way that it functions. So, longer, more conical cups sometimes can cause poking, or more cramping. If your vaginal canal is more curved and you've got this longer cup in there, you can imagine what that starts to do when you're sitting or doing different movements. The other problem I would hear from a lot of women, and I would experience myself, is you insert a cup. I actually have my cup here. So, you fold a cup, just, it gets to about the size of a tampon, and then you insert it, and it opens up to create a seal with the vaginal wall. The problem was some of these cups, you would put them in, and depending on what the strength of your vaginal muscle is or the atrophy of it, the cup may or may not open up, and then you get something that looks kind of like this, which creates a leak and a problem. And so what we did is we created this belly band here in the center that really helps the cup kind of pop open right after insertion. And it does so in the middle and at the top, so that you ensure that it opens up every time. You have to have a cup open up in order for that seal to properly form. The other thing that we noticed is, the poking right at the bottom. So what we did is we innovated a really rounded base, and a flexible stem. So if you don't need the stem, you can trim it. We found psychologically a lot of women really like having the stem. I think there's this we heard a lot of testers say, logically, I know this won't get lost in my vagina, but psychologically, I'm kind of freaking out about it. So we ended up putting a stem on, and it's really valuable to have that, particularly for women with higher cervix. A lot of people don't know, do I have a high cervix, a low cervix? And I have, like most people go, I have no idea. That's okay. We'll walk you through that. And our cup accommodates all of those, which is great. So having the flexible stem, you don't get any poking. It's a shorter cup, so you don't get that, just longer, more cramping. Even if you trim the stem, you're going to get a nice rounded base. So you can imagine as that's sitting on your pelvic floor or your vaginal opening, you just don't want anything chafing or rubbing there. That just sounds awful. And then removal of the cup is really important. And the way that you remove the cup is you've formed this seal, like a gentle suction seal, because there's 3 little suction holes. But now you need to break that seal to remove it, which means you do not just pull at the stem to break the seal. You actually need the lip of the cup to sort of break the seal, right? So what's unique about our cup is when you pinch at the base, it actually there's ribs in here that go up to the suction holes that help that seal break, so that when you go to remove it, it just glides right out. So, I think if you're going to innovate a product, you do have to look at what's already out there and ask yourself if you're really solving a problem. If not, you're going to be competing on another level, which might be price point or a different demographic. Maybe you're hitting a target market that nobody else has tapped into yet. And those are all viable options from like a business standpoint. But when you're looking at innovation itself, and it's really hard to get a utility patent because most things functionally have been thought of already. And so, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. That patent process was incredibly intense. It was a milestone that came with the cheers of a glass of bourbon, because it would take me like an hour and a half, 2 hours just to read the 18-page document. I mean, the patents are like a language all on their own. And so you've got to have people behind you that can help you walk through that journey. And there are wonderful people that will do that.
It's been about 2 years.
It's been 2 years. Yeah. So yeah, concept was about 2 years ago. And, we filed our utility patent this last summer because we really wanted, so what happens is you file a provisional, and then that gives you a year-long testing period, basically. We ended up testing for about 18 months with our test group we had these ideas of what we thought would work and solve these problems, but we really wanted that validated, not just by me, but by many, many women. So we developed this large test group of diverse women and had them actually test and give feedback on all the little nuances and, things that we changed each time. And we did like 5 iterations with them. And that was extremely helpful. So they would either validate something that I just needed. I think this is right. I think we're right on the money with this design part. Or they would say, nope, that didn't work for me. And why, right? And so then getting to the why. The other really valuable thing we got from running a test group was just just the psychological data of what women go through when they're shifting from a product they've used for maybe 10, 15, 20 years, a tampon, to something entirely different. And what does that feel like? What do they think? How it does seem crazy. One of the reasons we called it a Voxapod and not a cup is because I feel like the word cup is very off-putting. And so it's a fascinating thing. The experience that my testers went through, I also went through. I was a 20-year tampon user. So this was an experience that I think a lot of women go through. And so I think being able to have open conversations about it is reassuring for us as women, but it's also validating that, okay, this is normal. Like, this is a normal part of the process.
I want to stop you right there because there's so much that you just said that was so thought-provoking for me. So
yeah.
Teach business foundations to early stage entrepreneurs at many different venues. And I think at last count, I've had like 400 students over the last year.
Amazing.
Yeah. I'm amazed I'm still standing, but I am. And so, you have a product that required getting a patent, I love how you said recently that people are saying like there's the idea of the minimum viable product. So just make something and get it in the market and drop it.
Yeah.
Putting it in their vaginas.
Yeah. It can't just be an MVP. Like a minimum viable product is okay for some products, but when you're talking about, internal body use. Yeah.
But regardless of, and I always say this in my classes, is that regardless of the product or service, I've got people who are jewelry makers or other types of artists, coffee carts, food carts, restaurants, regardless of the product or service that they have, they still have to go through the same framework, which is what you've just talked about. You first identified a problem that you yourself understood the problem. And you said, if you're going to create something, because let's face it, I can't really think of much that is brand new to the world. Maybe 3D printing.
Yeah.
But there are other
outside of technology, right? Like tech stuff.
Exactly. So there's other stuff that solves the problem. So you're identifying how do you do it different? How do you do it better? What area are you competing? Because you are competing for somebody's mind share and heart share for your product. And then also testing the product. And, I teach people about focus groups and the importance of surveys. And what you had just said is what was really so valuable for you is basically the psychographics, the psychological stuff which provided natural language for you. You didn't use that term, but it's providing you the real language that women are using, that is their fears, their hopes, their aspirations, their values. And I'm sure that you use that to infuse into your Kickstarter video saying, here's the problem as we see it, and here's our solution.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's so powerful because regardless of what business is being started, it's still the same framework.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women entrepreneurs, Wendy, are actually their own demographic oftentimes because they've created something out of a need or a pain that they experienced and had. And so, but I think sometimes we lose sight of that personal story, that personal pain or journey that brought us to where we launched this business, because we start getting into the technicalities of running a business. And we forget that our greatest asset in connecting with our consumer is sometimes our own personal journey and story. Because it's that same personal journey and story of the consumer. So that was validating for me through my test group. And I think one of the things we really try and infuse in our website messaging and through our Kickstarter campaign is, this is real women advocating for real women. And I think that people can feel that and they can sense that when that authenticity and transparency is actually one of our core values, because you don't switch using a tampon to a menstrual cup oftentimes without a personal recommendation from a friend. Somebody's saying, you have to try this. This will change actually your life. And that sounds radical, but it is true. I mean,
it's true, actually.
Yeah. I mean, when I laughed shortly after we launched our test group, I went camping with a really good friend and we both were cycling at the same time. And she had tampons in and I had my cup in, and she just kept saying, don't you need to change that thing? Don't you need to change that thing? And I just said, no, I will just change it before I go to bed. I'm good to go. And she's like, that's crazy. How is that? And she's like now one of our biggest advocates.
I'm sure you converted the sale. So let's switch to funding your business.
Yes.
So you had the idea of the product. You had this genesis story that happened for your product. You created prototypes. You tested. You got the patents, and you have a small team of people. But so a lot of people that I work with are solopreneurs. One shop. So you got people who also have full-time jobs, but believe in the cause to help start the company. And you've also put a ton of your own savings in. So that is one point I want to start with, is that to be really clear that when people are starting businesses, the first source of funding is their own money, right?
Typically, not always, but typically, yes.
For the market that I'm not talking about your Silicon Valley. I have this idea that's going to get funded off of venture capital. I'm talking about the hundreds of business builders that I work with when they're starting their own business.
Yeah.
With Kickstarter, a stat I had read is that there's a ratio or an assumption about the capital, the money that you put into your own business before you do a Kickstarter campaign. And it was somewhere 20 to 30% for funding your business.
Oh yeah, at least. Yeah.
So Kickstarter is crowdfunding. So you're doing a marketing campaign to get people to be aware of the product and to help fund the product. So why did you guys decide to do a Kickstarter campaign, and what are you using the money for?
Yeah. So we decided to do a Kickstarter for multiple reasons. One is, when you're innovating something new, you put so much money into a certain point where you do have your technical MVP, your minimum viable product. And then at that point, before you continue to just pour more and more money into it, you really do need the market to validate that it wants what you're providing. And so that was crucial for us, was to have that actual market validation. We were getting validation from our test group. We were getting some social validation, even some press validation, but to have validation from the market itself, I think, is absolutely crucial. And to demonstrate that traction before you go and pitch to an investor. Most investors really aren't going to be that interested potentially unless they know you personally or are a part of the journey of innovating what you're doing. They want to see traction. It's too high of a risk for them to put an investment in you when you haven't got proof of concept or market validation yet. And so for me, it just did not make sense to go pitch to an investor. Now, had I not had enough personal seed money, and looking back, I maybe potentially would have sought more seed money and used less of my retirement funds to get this to the point that it is. But the other thing is, so with Kickstarter, looping back to that, you've got market validation, but then also our brand is really a movement. It's we are an incredible, innovative product. But our company brand and what we're trying to accomplish as a benefit corporation is really about creating a movement. And we believe that crowdfunding is about that. It's about creating a movement, or at least it used to be really hardcore. Now you see a lot of one-off companies on there just looking to turn a quick buck. And I think consumers are smart enough, they can discern the difference between the two. But having that market validation, having that traction to demonstrate, and also bringing people in as a collective to be a part of our movement. So that's what we're seeing. We've had an interesting, not so linear journey with Kickstarter so far. And what's been amazing to see is how many hundreds of people have literally sent notes of encouragement and cheering for it. People I don't know from all around the world. It's literally had me in tears at point, just to know that okay, this work is being validated, not just because it fills a physical need for them, but they want to see this change in, society and, economics as well. So those were kind of the three pillars of why we chose to do crowdfunding. The other thing is that I think is really important to draw attention to, Wendy, is that 97% of venture capital money still goes to white men. And so if you're a woman or you're a minority, your odds are obviously incredibly slim for getting that funding. And what crowdfunding really did is it disrupted that market for funding your business as a whole by creating a democratic system that allowed you to, receive funds in smaller quantities from the masses, as opposed to one big chunk, lump sum that you're now married to this investor and you're kind of at their mercy throughout that process. And then frankly, we needed the funds to get to market. So we've put so many thousands of dollars to get to this point. But now when you're a patented product, you've got to have tooling made, and it's tens of thousands of dollars.
Now you have to now you need to produce the product.
Yeah. So it's like we're at that point where we're bridging the gap between all the behind the scenes product development groundwork that we've laid and foundation of like company values to bridging it to the public. And in order to do that, that bridge requires an infusion of market capital. And so we've just opted to go the route of Kickstarter for the reasons I just outlined.
Yeah. So one of the things about Kickstarter campaigns that people don't realize is that it's an all or nothing proposition.
Yeah.
Set a goal, and you have to reach that goal. And if you don't get any of the money. So talk to us a little bit about how you set your funding goal. And you guys have such beautiful marketing. I mean, the brand is
Thank
beautiful.
you.
It's really wonderful. And so how did you prepare for the Kickstarter campaign?
That preparation was probably a year and a half. I've been getting bids from manufacturers, from distribution, from logistics, like all of my line of production for supply chain is all set up. It's just a matter of implementing it. So you don't know how much money you need to raise until you know how much money you need to get to market, right? So you've got to pound the pavement a bit. You've got to, I started vetting manufacturers a year and a half ago, and there's only 4 or 5 in the United States that do medical grade silicone because it requires a clean room manufacturing facility. But getting those bids, getting bids from people that can handle the shipping and the logistics and getting it out efficiently to, all corners of the world potentially. Everything from packaging to, there's all these little nuances. What software programs are you going to use? So we've been collecting bids for a year and a half, and I would keep track of all of those. And then of course I always advise people, because I've been advised by many people, to put in a 15% buffer, because there's so many things that you just can't anticipate for. Some things you can, like for example, I'm like, well, we're going to need a user guide, and this is a medical device technically. So I can't just put together a user guide. I need to have an attorney that's going to help me do this. So I got a bid from an attorney. It's $1,000 to have somebody, finalize your user guide that goes out with your product. So all of those things had to be built in. So we've got, it's really about 5 massive spreadsheets, to be frank with you, that really give a minute breakdown of what those expenses are going to be. I
want to stop you there for 1 sec. So
yeah.
What I love about that, and I think it's so important to highlight, is that you do have to understand what your operational costs are, not only your current operational costs, but your future operational costs.
Yes.
I think this is something I come across with my students very often, is they're very afraid about understanding their numbers or looking at their numbers. With my students who are starting their businesses, they often don't have a practice of managing their own personal money, let alone being able to forecast predictable revenue for their business. And I'm thinking about campaigns that I've seen recently here in Portland. Like there's a wonderful pop-up restaurant, and they want to open a restaurant near my house, and it's a Kickstarter campaign. So, they're not having the same, what's the word? They have a different kind of hurdles to jump through, jump over versus you. They don't need a clean room production facility.
Right.
You have to understand their costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had a good sense of what your costs were going to be. Part of it is guess, but it's a very educated guess.
Yeah.
You set a goal. And then when people make a Kickstarter pledge, which I have pledged.
Thank you, Wendy.
My absolute pleasure. So when we look at the options, how do you select how much people, what levels people can pledge in and what they get? What kind of thought rationale did you use?
So when I've sought advice from people, and believe me, the advice I've sought from people are people who've ran very, very successful Kickstarter campaigns. And there's really 2 schools of thought. One is you set your goal at exactly what you need. which we did initially. And that kind of came back to bite us because the algorithm is not the same on, you're seeing these algorithm shifts in everything from social media platforms, and Kickstarter's not exempt from that. So when you think about what they're, I'm going to infuse a little bit of Kickstarter's angle here just to help your listeners understand. Kickstarter makes a small percentage off of your campaign, but it only makes that percentage if your campaign is fully funded. So they therefore want to promote campaigns that are fully funded, and that have, their algorithm assesses a few other things like how many backers per day, how much money comes in per day, etc. So when we came out of the gates with a pretty high goal, and we were too far from that goal by day 5, and we had a really incredible start. I mean, we had like 12,500 on the first day. What happens is they actually start to demote your campaign in their algorithm. And so when we came out of the gates the second time, we set a very low goal, and that was really to appease the Kickstarter algorithm. Plus what we know of human behavior in general, there's what's called Matthew's Law, which is that people are more likely to fund a campaign if it's already funded. And so I've seen this before. And so that's the route that we're going, knowing that we have some contingency plans in place to make sure that we can always fulfill all of our orders. That is like our number one priority, is if people are backing, we absolutely want to stand behind the fact that we've promised a product to them. And so we will stand behind that. But the Kickstarter, I'm going to call it a game, is a little bit of a game. There's some tricks and strategies that, that you kind of have to play with. And there's still testing that you do. Like we're in day 4, we're still testing some new things, but you can carefully monitor in the back end of your campaign and your dashboard to see what's converting, what's not converting. The problem is it's a race, you've only got 30 days. So
is that the max amount of time one can have?
You can do 60 days, but the most successful campaigns are 30 days or less. So it's really, after 30 days, I think people get tired of hearing about it a little bit. I think if you run a successful campaign in 30 days, you can move over to Indiegogo and do like in demand or something like that, so that you can, the hard part is you've built all this momentum and you want to continue to run with it if you can. And so being able to take that over to some place where you can continue to take pre-order sales, that will just continue to help you reach your stretch goals and put out a better product in a more timely manner, et cetera, et cetera. So,
going back to what you said about the algorithm, some people listening or watching will be like, what the heck's an algorithm?
Yeah.
You guys have done an amazing job, continue to do an amazing job of nurturing your backers and prospective backers through email and through social media. When you're talking about the algorithm, specifically Kickstarter's algorithm, is this meaning that people who are getting the Kickstarter emails or coming to the Kickstarter website are shown or are not shown your campaign?
Yes. So if Kickstarter's algorithm is bumping you up, then you're going to have a lot higher visibility on the Kickstarter platform, and you'll actually see in your dashboard that you're getting conversions from the Kickstarter platform. And Kickstarter has about 5 ways that you can get, don't quote me on 5, maybe it's more, it might be more than that. I'm seeing 5 on mine is what I'm seeing. 5 ways. It's like advanced discovery, Kickstarter itself. I'm sure if you're a project we love or you get a staff pick, like those are probably other ways that you can get conversion traffic, but it breaks it down for you so you can actually see where that's coming. But yeah, the visibility is really key. There's, thousands of projects on there. And a lot of people don't realize only 20% of Kickstarter campaigns actually fund. There's 80% don't, So you don't want to willy-nilly your way into just throwing out a campaign.
I also really didn't know, I'm so glad you said that you can track where your funders are coming from.
Yeah. Like, for example, Wendy, we put so much work into our Instagram feed before the campaign and really built that up. We did giveaways and all of this stuff. And I just am not seeing conversions from Instagram. And I did not put nearly as many efforts into Facebook. I did maintain it, but I did not put the same level, because I really felt like our demographic of consumer was on Instagram. And I still think that they are, but most of our conversions from social media have come from Facebook. And I just didn't anticipate that. And so now that we know that, that's an easy pivot for us, right? Like, okay, so let's channel more energy here and really focus on that. So having that data information is crucial, but a lot of times you may not get that until you're a week deep in your campaign. And at that point, like, you've got to act and act fast, you know?
You have 3 more weeks to go.
Yeah.
Okay, and can you explain something else? So you talked about Kickstarter and then moving that into Indiegogo. So what is the difference in between the Kickstarter and Indiegogo platforms as crowdfunding, and why would you do that?
Yeah. I believe once you launch on Kickstarter, you can't launch on Indiegogo, or maybe it's the other way around. If you've launched on Indiegogo, then you can't launch on Kickstarter. I think that's actually the case.
At the same time or after?
I'm not sure on that one. I do not recommend you launch at the same time on 2 platforms. I think you just, you're diluting your, you want people to see social validation. So you want all your pledges in one place. You want to be driving, and you don't want to be paying marketing dollars to send people to different places. That's just crazy. So the biggest difference between Kickstarter and Indiegogo is that Kickstarter is an all or nothing platform. So whatever you set your funding goal at, if you do not hit that, you get nothing. Indiegogo, you can do a flexible funding goal. So even if you might set your goal, say 50,000, but even if you come up at 33,000 or 40,000, you still can take that home. So, but then Indiegogo has what's called Indiegogo in demand, which is where once your campaign is over, people can continue to place orders, which is really great because you've built all of this momentum. And then to just bring that to like a screeching halt on Kickstarter is kind of painful. When you start to see, okay, I'm getting 50 to 100 customers a day, and all of a sudden I have to just shut that faucet off. So Kickstarter actually allows you to, I think, add a link so you can actually drive traffic after your campaign is over to Indiegogo on demand and continue to take orders while you're prepping for fulfillment. And of course that, that extra money is just, like I said, it's going to help you be more efficient and effective and maybe hit some of those stretch goals and,
Yeah. And so Indiegogo on demand, just to clarify that, so Indiegogo on demand is different than Indiegogo.
It's different than running a crowdfunding campaign. So in demand is like after your campaign has finished and you're taking orders on demand at that point.
That's so interesting because I didn't know that. And when I think about Indiegogo, I usually think about that. I think about Kickstarter as being funding, new businesses.
Yeah.
And GoFundMe being like, my neighbor's house was burned down. Can we, help
social causes? Sure.
And I think about Indiegogo as like, we're a nonprofit and we're trying to, keep these girls in Africa in school. So I'm hearing you say that the Indiegogo on demand is a business, a strategy that a business can use once it's completed its Kickstarter campaign.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you are right. There are a lot of social venture causes that use Indiegogo, where Kickstarter initially was designed more for product and artist and innovation. So if you look at their categories of projects, they're pretty specific. And so that's why you see some, specific categories that favor Indiegogo. And a lot of people don't realize this. Indiegogo actually was around before Kickstarter. They're actually the original crowdfunding platform. Yeah. But when you look at traffic and demand, and depending on what your project type is, there's just a lot of variables that you need to assess with that. It made the most sense for us to be on Kickstarter.
Cool.
Yeah.
And a question that I hear a lot is, is Kickstarter free? So can you talk about the cost beyond time, marketing?
Yeah. No, it's not, nothing is free. No, it's not free. So Kickstarter takes a 5% cut if your campaign is fully funded, which I think is fair. I think that's fair. They're providing the platform. It's just like anything. If I were to go sell wholesale, I'm going to pay a cut to that store to host my product and bring in consumers to buy it, you know, and we're going to split the margins on that. So it makes sense. So you've got a 5% Kickstarter fee, and then you also have a 3% Stripe fee, which is their payment program. And I think it's 3% and then 20 cents per transaction. So
So
that adds up. You've got to add that in. Like that can end up being $2 to $3 grand. So you've got to add that in.
Yeah.
$2 to $3 grand for the Stripe, and then additional for Kickstarter, right? And then, you know, the original Kickstarter, I think, was really designed for that you could be this artist and come out and make this, you know, home Ecky Becky video from home, shoot it on your iPhone, you know, throw together your project, share it with your friends and family. And I think it's gotten more complex, you know, because as they have funded hundreds and hundreds and, you know, thousands potentially projects, like, and some really big ones in the, you know, multi-million-dollar level, it's become a real business. And so it doesn't cater as much, I don't think, to that smaller, on a whim, we're going to throw together a campaign. You know, you've got to put out a good video, and that costs money up front. You've got to put together your email campaigns, and I think you really have to have marketing dollars. You're competing with 30,000 other projects on the platform. So you have to be driving specific target audiences to your campaign. You know, the average, I think, conversion rate is like 2%. So, and ours right now is about 8%. So you know, our conversion's really high, but you've got to have traffic, right? And that traffic has to get there. And unless you're really high up on the Kickstarter algorithm and your project's just blowing up, or it's super innovative and the market's just been dying to have it, you've got to figure out how to get that traffic there. It's called crowdfunding, but you have to bring the crowd. So
oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's quotable.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. So Amanda, tell us specifically how people can support the Voxapod campaign. So when does it, what are the levels of pledging?
Yeah.
Find it.
Oh, you also asked me about pledge levels. Was that one of your questions too? Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have pledge levels at different areas, depending on what your product is. There's strategies to that, and they do vary depending on what your product is. But we tried to keep levels at, you know, starting out at $35 up to, you know, 5,000, which is pretty typical. So right now, the best way people can support our project is to back our campaign. So even if you're not somebody that menstruates, you can donate a cup to a girl in need, or if you're past the menstruating age and you want to help other women, you can donate several cups, or you can just donate money even to campaigns, which a lot of people don't realize. Then we've had quite a few backers that have done that. They're men, or they are beyond menstruating age, and they really just want to support the cause and what we're doing. So if you go to our campaign, the website the link I would want you to use would be www.17e.fnd.to/Voxapod.
Whoa. Okay. So I went to www.voxapod.com. So
you can also go to our website and click the link to our Kickstarter page from there.
Does it take you to the same place?
It does take you to the same place. These are exclusion links. We're using exclusion links because we've hired, you know, digital marketing ninjas, and so they get a cut of what they bring to the table, which is fine. But we would, if we're doing the work to bring somebody to the campaign, we want to make sure we get the credit for it. So if you go, it might be easier to just go to our website, which is voxapod.com, and click the link on the homepage, and that'll take you directly to our campaign.
That's awesome. It's so beautifully done. Okay, Amanda, this is amazing. It was so informative for me, and I would love to close with like the 3 hot tips that you would give to somebody starting a campaign. Before we go there, though, I want to underscore again, like you are creating a product. It's a national product, international.
Yeah,
international.
Yeah, we'll that's down the road, but yeah, we are selling on Kickstarter to some international companies, but as far as our market reach goes, initially will be national.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a product that's gone through this R&D process and it's patented. But I do want to underscore for our watchers or our listeners that these takeaways are the same process if you're a mom and pop shop, you know, in your town or your city, and you want to open a yogurt shop or a new restaurant or a dance studio. There's some really, and I'm seeing that right now, like we had on Hawthorne, there was a yogurt shop that did a Kickstarter campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And then the restaurant that I'm thinking of right now, who I've been watching do these pop-up restaurants, it's the restaurant May.
Okay.
So they do, for a couple years, at least a year and a half, they've done these pop-up restaurants where they don't have their own brick and mortar space. They're using other people's space, and they'll do like dinner for 40, and they'll send the email in the morning and say, it's Appalachian Southern food. And they'll say, hey, y'all, we're having dinner, you know, tonight. We've got 40 seats, first come, first serve. That's the voice that I imagine. I read the email.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they sell out within an hour, and it'll be like, y'all, you'll get an email and says, y'all are so sweet, we're sold out. And so I've been watching this for like a year and a half, and now they're doing a Kickstarter, opening a brick and mortar right near house, which I've backed. And so I really like this idea that people, you know, you don't have to be creating the huge thing, but you do have to follow some simple things. And some of the things I heard you say was just really understanding your operations and your numbers to start with.
Yeah.
You know, and
know what your costs are going to be up front.
Know what those costs are, right?
Absolutely.
And you had said you've been getting bids and auditing bids. You've got this 5-page spreadsheet. And I think for some people, you know, if you are that, you know, that restaurant owner, that might seem really first, but like everything in building a business, you're taking it step by step. You're like, okay, now I need to figure out the fit out for my restaurant. Now I need to figure out, you know, the marketing costs for my restaurant. And then the other thing I heard you say was like, you've created basically a tribe of followers and fans before you started your Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, that's really crucial. Your biggest conversion will be your email list, your personal emails and your email list. You know, email campaigns convert 70% higher than social media.
Wow.
So,
that's amazing right there.
Yeah. So building your email list. So if you're a small business, you know, and when you're going to those, you know, farmers markets or, you know, little trade shows or pop-up shops, things like that, be collecting emails while you're there and adding those into your email campaign software. So basically everything you should do, you should be collecting those emails if you can.
Awesome.
And those are your fans anyway. Like those are the people that want to know what you're up to.
Right.
You know, you're not spamming them. They want to know. They're engaged and they want to support you. So.
Yeah. So building a list before, because I can't remember exactly what you said, but I'm gonna find it and share that about, you know, it's called crowdfunding, but you're bringing the crowd to the
market. You're responsible to bring the crowd. So.
And the other thing that you have talked about is, you know, really having, you didn't say it specifically like this, but having actually a marketing process and a plan and process, you know, clear messaging, and you're doing this email nurturing campaign and social media. So you didn't just like say, okay, we're going to flip the switch on our 30-day Kickstarter campaign.
No. We actually did a 28-day countdown, sort of a tongue-in-cheek on the 28-day cycle. So we did a countdown on all of our platforms, really kind of creating a build up to the launch, and providing lots of information. And it was great for, as we were doing in press outreach, like if you've got a higher dollar funding goal, you're going to probably need press to get there. And I would say you need a 3 to 4 month runtime on that. Yeah. So to come in and try and start seeking press while you're in the middle of your campaign, you can do, but a lot of those people, particularly print, you know, they need a longer lead time to get that stuff out. So
you just got great press, right? Didn't you just get features?
Yeah, we've gotten a few local, and then it's interesting because you'll send out these press releases, and sometimes people will publish them and they don't even tell you they're publishing them. So I like Googled my company and I found blog articles that I didn't even know were the people I don't know, which was great, but they literally just took stuff from the press release. You do want to have a really great press release.
Yeah.
Teaser ads are a great thing to have, like teaser videos, or, have some of the ads prepared ahead of time, test them, A/B test them, figure out what audience works. These are all great things to be doing in that 6 months before you actually launch.
So I know that some of the people who are listening or watching will be like, I don't even know what that means. And that's so overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
I just want to make beautiful food and I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah. And if they're needing a lower funding goal, I think you don't have to be that technical. I think you can get away with saying, we've got our 1,000 social media followers and we've got our email list, or maybe you've got 300 social media followers and we're going to tell people about it. And then really you want to compile your list of friends and family too. I mean, those are going to be your biggest supporters right out of the gate. So most people have that, right? Like if you're going, how do I do this simply? I'm only looking to raise 5,000 to 10,000. Usually you could do that with that, depending on what your network reach is. But if you're looking to raise over, $50,000, you need to be a little bit more strategic about that, unless you've got some big funders that are coming in. And in that case, you may just be reaching out to those funders and not doing a crowdfunding campaign,
right.
Unless you're using it for marketing efforts. So.
And so for those big takeaways, we said, understanding your cost.
Yeah, know your cost up front.
Building your list and leveraging your list, because
Yep.
that's the highest, when we say list, we're talking about your email list.
Yep.
It's opted in. And then this, having a very intentional marketing.
Have a strategy. Yeah. Even if it's not really robust and complex, have a strategy.
Add in there is like the top things that you would.
What's that?
Is there anything else you'd add in there that'd be like the top things?
I think if you can talk to other people that have ran successful campaigns before, you get a lot of really great advice from doing that. Have a timeline, because there's things like, for example, you can't just make a Kickstarter campaign live. You have to get approval from Kickstarter, and that can take up to 2 weeks. So you want to have a timeline of like 2 weeks prior, I need to submit this to Kickstarter for approval, and that gives me enough time to rectify something if something was off. I think their average response time is 30 hours, but it can take. And so I've seen people like gear up their whole, we got everybody, all of our followers like excited about this launch date, and then our campaign wasn't approved on time. And so we had to, right? So just little nuances like that. There's a great book called The Kickstarter Handbook. It's a yellow cover. I don't remember the name of the author, but that's a really great basic book for just foundational things. And it's got lots of good examples in it. There's tons of resources online as well, free resources. CrowdCrux is a good, blog and website to follow to get, lots of information. That can be a little overwhelming because they get super technical on some things, but you can get the gist of a lot of stuff. And really, Kickstarter and Indiegogo themselves as platforms provide a ton of information that help walk you through on how to do a campaign and how to successfully do it and what to do at what point. And so do some reading on their own, those platforms. It's their wealth of knowledge right there. So
understand the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing. So I'm going to put the link to your campaign. When does your campaign end? And
April 6th. The other ask I have for those that are watching, Facebook has been a really great resource for us. And so if you can share a campaign with your personal networks, that really makes a huge difference. Especially if you back the project, let your friends and family know, hey, I backed this project because, I want to see more girls be able to stay in school after they start their period, or, I want to help create more sustainable ways of doing everyday living. And give a personal testimony. And even if you don't want to give a personal testimony, share the link that Wendy's posting and with your network, and that helps a lot.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope this helps your listeners for sure.
And I wish you all the best of luck on your campaign. It's amazingly done. You're so talented, and I love the product, and I can't wait to see your production start. And remember me when you're famous.
I remember all my backers. I read every email that comes in. I respond to them personally. I read every survey that came in. Yeah, you guys are my tribe. So I want to take really good care of everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda.
Yep.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.